Good evening, everybody. I am John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my channel, and it's called McDuff Lives. And thanks for joining me tonight. It's Friday night, and I hope everybody had a good week. I hope you get a chance to relax a little bit this weekend. We've got some snow falling here on Mystery Island. It's actually kind of pretty out there, and you know, I don't mind it once in a while, and so it's kind of pretty. I don't think we're going to have any dangerous amounts like we did a couple weeks ago when we lost power for almost 24 hours. That was an experience. So, how's everybody doing? Hello, being here, Tyrone, Miss Hunt, Corky, and all the sun is here. Charles Held is here. All right. Disco Winter, have you been? I haven't seen you in a while. Hello, Christy. Christy's here. Great. And fabulous. Yeah, I was thinking, all the stuff that goes on, but that when the snow falls, it still falls. It's still pretty, and it's still an experience, and it's part of life that um has has a little bit of calming effect. That say, yeah, it's winter time, it's snowing. That's all things are as they should be, and while we know that all things are not as they should be, at least we can take a little breath now and then and enjoy the fact that, yeah, it's still nice when it snows. Miss Hunt says, when I lived in Capitol Hill, the Lyndon LaRouche guys were evangelizing, were cute, and maybe even interested in girls once in a while. Oh, well, I'm sure they were all interested in girls. Um, and yeah, I remember Capitol Hill. I went to law school at Georgetown, which is kind of on the other side of the Capitol from the residential part that's called Capitol Hill, but it's still Capitol Hill. And that's where my favorite Irish bar. It was two Irish bars. There was the Irish Times and uh, and the Dubliner, and that was a nice place to be when you got your studies done at law school and go down and hear the great Brendan Mulvihill on the fiddle. Hey, Aaron Adler's here. Hello, Aaron. And Kathy Sue is here. Thank goodness. I'm so glad to have you guys. And I think Kathy might be the only wrench I have tonight. So if you guys see something, I will, I'll catch it myself, or Kathy, I'm sure, will catch it. There it is right there. Children of Satan, my own copy that I got from Marcia Malouk of the LaRouche organization, who's published these back in, let me get the date, 2004. Okay, August 2004, published by LaRouche. And on the cover, you have Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, um, John Ashcroft, and Donald Rumsfeld. And this is Dick Cheney at the World Economic Forum in 2004. Children of Satan. Why Cheney has to go? This is the back cover. When at the end of July 2004, he announced the formation of LaRouche PAC, former Democratic presidential candidate Lyndon LaRouche stressed the fact that Vice President Dick Cheney, the puppet master behind President Bush, must be removed from office immediately, if possible before the November elections. To that end, LaRouche PAC is republishing the three most effective weapons against Cheney, which have been launched over the past year and a half, Children of Satan pamphlets issued by the LaRouche campaign. From the time Children of Satan Satan 1 came out in April 2003 to January 2004 when Children of Satan 2, The Beast Men, was published. A major political offensive was catalyzed against the vice president. Okay, but that's not good enough. Cheney, as the leading representative of the satanic synarchist movement, this is my point, okay? The satanic synarchist movement threatening the United States and the world has to go. Read this book and help distribute it to others. Your family's future and that of your nation depend upon it. Paid for by the Lyndon LaRouche PAC and not authorized by any candidate or candidates committee, it says. And so this book compiles 3 pamphlets. And so you see where I'm going with this is if we go back into uh, the roots of synarchism, and I haven't done much of that yet, but you go into this specific kind of Freemasonry called Martinism, and then you study the philosophers behind that, which I'm just now doing on my own, so I'm catching up to that part of it. But that's all happening in the early 1800s. So the ideas behind synarchism are developing throughout the 1800s or the 19th century. And what this is in my view a kind of a philosophical justification of returning to the imperial system um, of uh, of ancient Rome, of reinstating something like the Holy Roman Empire, only something that would be pan-European, and having it to be an imperial style of government whereby the common people don't have any rights whatsoever, serfdom. And that is where we're headed now with these folks that want to basically take us back into the Middle Ages. So it is the word synarchism simply means, the literal translation from the Greek roots is that it rules together. What it really means is the powers that already are elite and wealthy will continue to work together to exclude the rest of us and benefit by robbing us, stealing everything that they can from us, hopefully without us noticing. I'm also in the middle of absorbing this amazing book, Coup in Dallas, The Decisive Investigation into Who Killed JFK by H.P. Albarelli Jr., with 2 of his associates finishing the book because he died before it was complete. And it's quite a volume. There's a whole lot of stuff in it that's interesting and worth studying. I want to read just a couple of pages for you, just because I think it feels kind of personally important to me, and it has to do with our theme as well as the way I feel about my father's time and what happened. It's chapter 4, and it's called Suicides and Call Girls. On the morning of December 2nd, 1963, 10 days after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, Edward Grant Stockdale, a ruggedly handsome 48-year-old businessman and cohort of both Jack and Robert Kennedy, fell to his death from the 13th floor of the Alfred I. DuPont building in downtown Miami. Stockdale tumbled 8 floors from his business office window before his body struck and landed on a fifth-floor ledge. He was wearing a white dress shirt and gray suit pants. Miami police investigators determined Stockdale's death to be an, quote, apparent suicide. Stockdale left no note or letter, according to investigators, and despite their determination, it remains unclear as to how Stockdale went out the window of his office. It is uncertain whether the window Stockdale went out of was open or closed. Some scant newspaper reports seem to indicate it was open. Requests from these authors and others for a copy of the police investigative file brought the response that the file was no longer available. One official who declined to be named for this book said he thought the file, quote, had been either lost or misplaced years ago, unquote. The facts preceding his so-called suicide only served to compound the difficulty of believing the investigators' conclusion. Stockdale, as usual, arrived in his office about 10 a.m. on the morning of Monday, December 2nd, 1963. His office was on the 13th floor of the office building in downtown Miami. Stockdale was unable to get into his office because it was locked, and he didn't have a key with him. His administrative assistant, who usually opened the office each day, was at a dental appointment. She would arrive at about 10:30 a.m., 10 minutes after Stockdale's death. Finding his office door locked, Stockdale had gone across the hall to a law office and asked Mary Ruth Hauser if anyone had a key to his office. Hauser told Stockdale that she would call the building's manager to come with the key. Stockdale waited while Hauser made the call. She recounted the next day, quote, he followed me into my office and stood there while I called down for a key. He stood there very calmly. He didn't seem at all agitated. Somehow, the subject of the president's death came up. He told me he was in his office when his wife called to tell him that the president had been shot. He said he just got down on his knees and prayed, unquote. After this, a person with a key arrived, and Stockdale and Hauser went across the hall, still talking. As Stockdale entered his now opened office, Hauser's desk phone started ringing, and she excused herself to answer it. Hauser told police that about 5 minutes later, there, quote, was a terrible thud. It was the sound of Stockdale's body striking the roof ledge of the top floor of the Florida National Bank and Trust, about 75 feet below his office. Hauser said, quote, I just wondered if I had gone right behind him. I don't know. I guess it wouldn't have made any difference. The whole world has just gone mad, unquote. Only minutes after Stockdale struck the fifth-story ledge, Dr. Sheffield H. Wright, who had an office in the DuPont building, rushed to the scene and pronounced Stockdale dead. A priest from a nearby Catholic church also arrived and administered the last rites. Newspaper accounts of Stockdale's death featured interviews with a number of people who had seen Stockdale before he arrived at his office that fateful morning. All said he seemed to be in, quote, good spirits. Indeed, Stockdale even got a shoe shine just before coming to the office. An article in the Miami Herald Reporter, however, by political reporter John B. McDermott revealed that Stockdale had attempted to talk to McDermott on Sunday, December 1st. McDermott stated that Stockdale, quote, wanted to tell me something, to talk things over. Unfortunately, McDermott didn't talk to Stockdale and seemed to have no clue as to what he had to say. McDermott's article also stated that on Saturday, November 23rd, the day after the JFK assassination, Stockdale flew to Washington, D.C. after he received a telephone call from Attorney General Bobby Kennedy. McDermott apparently had no idea why Kennedy had summoned Stockdale. Stockdale returned from Washington late that same day and then returned to Washington on November 26th. On that day, he met with Bobby Kennedy and Edward Kennedy and then flew back to Miami the same day. The next day, Edward Kennedy called Stockdale's wife and told her he was concerned about her husband's, quote, mental health. Again, McDermott provides no information as to why Stockdale met with the Kennedys. Interviewed in June 2004, Grant's daughter, Ann Stockdale, apparently acutely aware of the dangers of speaking candidly about her father's alleged suicide even 4 decades later, made no reference to revelations that rocked D.C. politics in the fall of 1963, including the Bobby Baker scandal that had forced her family to leave Dublin and the Ellen Romach affair. Perhaps for Grant's daughter, the safer explanation was the military-industrial complex. And then he quotes her. President Kennedy asked Daddy to go to the Air Force Base south of Miami to see if, parentheses against Kennedy's orders, bombs were being loaded on the planes. Bombs were being loaded on the planes. I believe one of the reasons Daddy was killed was because he knew that the government was being run by the military complex. The military complex didn't want the American people to realize, parentheses, and still don't, that they were calling the shots. Daddy knew he was being followed, and he told Mom that they were going to get him. And they did. There was an attempt on my life also, several days after Daddy's funeral. I realize now that this was a scare tactic to silence my mother. That is, if you speak about anything, your kids are dead. It worked. Author and publisher David Talbot writes that Stockdale, quote, flew to Washington and talked with Robert and Edward Kennedy about the assassination of their brother. On his return to Miami, Stockdale told several of his friends that the world was closing in. On December 1st, he spoke to his attorney, William Freites, who later recalled, quote, he started talking. It didn't make much sense. He said something about those guys trying to get him, then about the assassination. As intriguing as Anne Stockdale's and David Talbot's revelations are, few were aware at the time of Stockdale's acquaintanceship with Otto and Ilse Scorzani in Ireland and the possible impact this may have had on his untimely death. Though, two things about what I just read. The first is I really sympathize with his daughter getting interviewed in 2006 and still being concerned about something that happened 40 years later. And I'll be honest with you, I've been concerned about it myself in just surfacing and saying, here's my dad and here's what I think happened to him. And it's time that we stop families from suffering like this, to stop having people to have to live a life of silence to avoid something happening to their relatives. And I don't think that my father is the only one in my family that suffered in this way. And I won't go into it more right now, but I don't think it's that rare either. I think you probably find some in your family or friends uh, that have been caused to suffer in that way. To be threatened, to be blackmailed, to be frightened, to live a life where you can't, live an honest, forthright existence the way we're supposed to. So note that where I stopped reading, They were just getting ready to start talking about Stockdale's relationship with Otto and Ilsa Scorzeni, and there's where this all ties into the synarchy. Well, this is the book that I want to read a little bit from, and there's so much I just want to just pick. Uh, I'm going to just pick this essay on page 82 by Jeffrey Steinberg. It's called Synarchism, the Fascist Roots of the Wolfowitz Cabal. And remember, Wolfowitz is on the cover of the book, and so this is in the Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, George W. era. In 1922, Count Richard Coudenhove-Kalergi launched the Pan-European Union as a founding convention in Vienna attended by more than 6,000 delegates. Railing against the Bolshevist menace in Russia, the Venetian Count called for the dissolution of all the nation-states of Western Europe and the erection of a single European feudal state, modeled on the Roman and Napoleonic empires. There are Europeans, he warned, who are naive enough to believe that the opposition between the Soviet Union and Europe can be bridged by the inclusion of the Soviet Union in the United States of Europe. These Europeans need only to glance at the map to persuade themselves that the Soviet Union, in its immensity, can, with the help of the Communist Third International, very quickly prevail over little Europe. To receive this Trojan horse into the European Union would lead to perpetual civil war and the extermination of European culture. So long, therefore, as there is any will to survive subsisting in Europe, the idea of linking the Soviet Union with Pan-Europe must be rejected. It would be nothing less than the suicide of Europe. Elsewhere, Coudenhove-Kalergi echoed the contemporaneous writings of British Fabian Round Table devotees H.G. Wells and Lord Bertrand Russell, declaring, quote, "This eternal war can end only with the constitution of a world republic. The only way left to save the peace seems to be a politic of peaceful strength on the model of the Roman Empire that succeeded in having the longest period of peace in the West thanks to the supremacy of his legions." The launching of the Pan-European Union was bankrolled by the Venetian-rooted European banking family, the Warburgs. Max Warburg, scion of the German branch of the family, gave Coudenhove-Kalergi 60,000 gold marks to hold the founding convention. Even more revealing, the first mass rally of the Pan-European Union in Berlin at the Reichstag was addressed by Hjalmar Schacht, later the Reichsbank's head, economics minister and chief architect of the Hitler coup. A decade later, in October 1932, Schacht delivered a major address before another pan-European event in which he assured Coudenhove-Kalergi and others, quote, "In 3 months, Hitler will be in power. Hitler will create Pan-Europea, or Pan-Europa. Only Hitler can create Pan-Europa." According to historical documents, Italy's fascist dictator Benito Mussolini was initially skeptical about the Pan-Europa idea, but he was won over by the scheme following a meeting with Coudenhove-Kalergi, during which, in the Count's words, quote, "I gave him a complete harvest of Nietzsche's quotes from the United States for the United States of Europe. My visit represented a shift in the behavior of Mussolini towards Pan-Europa. His opposition disappeared." At the founding Congress of the Pan-European Union in Vienna, the backdrop behind the podium was adorned with portraits of the movement's leading intellectual icons: Immanuel Kant, Napoleon Bonaparte, Giuseppe Mazzini, and Friedrich Nietzsche. The pivotal role of Schacht in the Hitler coup and in the Pan-European Union highlights a critical dimension of the universal fascist scheme: the top-down role of the financial, quote, overworld and its banking technocrats. The top-down role of the banking overworld and its banking technocrats. By all historical accounts, Schacht was the architect in 1930 of the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, along with the Bank of England's Montague Norman. Historian Carroll Quigley, in his epic book, Tragedy and Hope: A History of the World in Our Time, described the BIS scheme to establish a dictatorship over world finance. Quote, the powers of financial capital had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. Is that not exactly what Klaus Schwab openly says he wants? The economic control of the countries by planting these young global leaders into all the governments. And there we have Ursula von der Leyen, the the beautiful blonde Nordic German lady who's telling us all, you know, what we need to do, because she's talking for the pharmacy of the world. That's what Europe and Germany are going to be, the pharmacy of the world. I mentioned her name because you ought to start looking at her. Remember Christine Lagarde? She was very important, still is. But this is the next female leader in Europe. She's the president, I think, of the European Union, something like that. But very close to Soros and all the bankers. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert, by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Each central bank in the hands of men like Montague Norman of the Bank of England, Benjamin Strong of the New York Federal Reserve Bank, Charles Rist of the Bank of France, and Hjalmar Schacht of the Reichsbank, sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence the level of economic activity in the country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. Unquote. Quigley highlights the role of Schacht's closest ally in the BIS scheme, Bank of England Governor Norman, who headed the privately owned British institution for an unprecedented 24 years from 1920 to 1944. Norman was a strange man, Quigley reported, whose mental outlook was one of successfully suppressed hysteria or even paranoia. He had no use for governments and feared democracy. Both of these seemed to him to be threats to private banking, and thus to all that was proper and precious in human life. Strong-willed, tireless, and ruthless, he viewed his life as a kind of cloak and dagger struggle with the forces of unsound money, which were in league with anarchy and communism. Montague Norman and Hjalmar Schacht personified the banking overworld that bankrolled and installed Hitler and the Nazis in power in pursuit of their larger universal fascist scheme. Even more damning were the profiles of Schacht and Norman and their role in the Hitler Project in the Hitler Book by a Schiller Institute research team headed by Helga Zeppler-Rouche, dated 1984. Quote, the BIS, nominally set up after the breakdown of normal international financial relations in order to prevent a downward spiraling of international payments, in fact, finished off the hapless Weimar Republic by its stern refusal to come to the help of a virtually bankrupt Germany in the crucial summer of 1931, after the Donat Bank collapse had brought the whole nation to its knees. Schacht, who had been a member of the original BIS team and was to return to its board from 1933 to 1938, had been campaigning since his 1930 resignation as head of the Reichsbank for Anglo-American support for a takeover by the NSDAP, that is the Nazi Party, and its leader, Adolf Hitler. He had resigned on March 7, 1930, and the BIS was formally established in June. In September, he was off to London and the United States to, quote, sell the Nazi option to Anglo-American leadership, notably Bank of England Governor and BIS Director Montague Norman, and the already influential Dulles brothers of Sullivan and Cromwell law firm, one of America's most influential, and the attorneys for I.G. Farben, and many other large German companies and provincial governments. Schacht's Hamburg friend and colleague, patrician Nazi Gerhard Westrick, and ran the correspondent law firm to Dulles's in Germany. On March 16, 1933, a grateful Hitler brought Schacht back to head the Reichsbank, explained the Hitler Book a year later. Schacht was made economics minister. Quote, now the BIS was going to help the Third Reich. By 1939, it had no less than several hundred million Swiss gold francs invested in Germany. On the BIS board were Baron Kurt von Schroeder, by now a general in the SS Death's Head Brigade, Dr. Hermann Schmitz of I.G. Farben, whom Schacht had trained at the Imperial Economics Ministry from 1915 on, and later Hitler's own personal appointees, Walter Funk and Emil Pohl of the Reichsbank. The larger universal fascist scheme into which the Norman Schacht Hitler Project fit was well known to leading American intelligence, military, and diplomatic figures of the Franklin Roosevelt era, who maintained exhaustive files under such headings as, quote, synarchist, Nazi, communist. U.S. government archives from the FDR era, which were made available to EIR researchers, feature extensive intelligence reports on the international fascist plots from the files of the U.S. State Department, U.S. Army Intelligence and Navy Intelligence, and the Coordinator of Information and its successor, the OSS. These files are of immediate relevance today, given the ongoing coup d'etat in Washington by the disciples of Leo Strauss, Alexander Koyeve, and Carl Schmitt inside the George W. Bush administration. The evidence is overwhelming that this thing called the synarchy not only is real, but it has been real for 100 years or more, and that it does not observe national boundaries, and business as usual is its motto, and its goal in life is to protect banks. just like Montague Norman. His whole life was all about making sure that the Bank of England was sound and producing for its investors because it's a private bank. And that's where all this leads is to all of the economy in the hands of a few people, like a feudal system with kings and dukes and counts and earls and barons. And the rest of us are just going to be little serfs and chess pieces on the board that get to be pushed around and forced into armies and things like that. And if you ever study Prussia and the reputation of Friedrich II, Friedrich the Great, he was all about militaries. He's all about organized army. His his kingdom was a military kingdom. Everybody, there was universal conscription for males. And so if you weren't going into the church and if you weren't in a noble family, then you were going to probably get conscripted. And he was a warrior. All he did was go to war. That was his whole state policy, was basically, who can I fight next? And he lost a lot. And then he won a lot. But it's that mentality of what is life other than winning and losing. There's nothing else there. And so from if you're from a military point of view, you admire the organization and there's a lot of pomp and stuff with it too. And the Prussian military music is very exciting. You know, feel like oompa. No, it's good music. It really is. It's great music. And the marching and all that stuff, but the discipline, that's the famous thing about the Prussian military is they're just so disciplined. And but the soldiers are basically slaves. They have to obey orders. They have to go where they're told. They can't leave the barracks without permission. That's the kind of world that they want. The idea of American Constitution is so foreign to them. It really does appear that the whole idea of the Congress of Vienna, 1815, the Congress of Vienna was one of the most important things that ever happened in the world, and it really just evolves about Europe and the end of the Napoleonic era, where Napoleon was finally absolutely defeated. And so all of the kings and emperors got back together again and said, "Hey, we're never going to let this ever happen again." So they decided to make a deal where they would, exchange a little territory and make sure that they took care of each other, and so that they would always work together to make sure that there was no more of these crazy, you know, Democrats trying to take power. No more Republicans trying to take power. It's all got to get back to organized imperial top down government. Without that organization, it's chaos and we all fall back into the Stone Age sooner or later. So that's the idea of synarchism is you want to return to an oligarchy that has all the money and all of the power. And boy, they sure are looking that way right now to me. And to consider the idea that they got these people like Cheney in power, And they do push people out of windows of the 13th floor. And they do threaten people's families if they talk. And and a lot of the times when they get done using you, they just kill you because you know too much. But if you look from Hjalmar Schacht to Otto Skorzeny, then to Stockdale, you have tied the synarchy to JFK. And when you absorb some more of what I've been reading in this new book, you'll I'm becoming convinced that it is absolutely it's the same people that were running uh, the the synarchy that put Hitler in power are the same ones that put together and assassinated President Kennedy. And by extension, I think that my dad is also one of the ones that they got rid of. So this is exciting to me. I feel like I'm getting very, very close to some stuff. There's a lot in this book by Albarelli, Aku, and Dallas that is getting me closer and closer. Uh, if you remember the the uh, BND or, agent named George White that figures prominently in Doug Valentine's book, "This the Strength of the Wolf." Uh, Guy did all the dirty tricks or a lot of the dirty tricks for the CIA while he's working for the Bureau of Narcotics or Federal Bureau of Narcotics, whatever it was called at that time, FBN, I think it was. But that was an amazing thing to read in Doug Valentine's book, how the CIA was using FBN people to do dirty deeds like dropping LSD into somebody's drink. And so this George White does appear a lot now in Albarelli's book, Coup in Dallas. So it's quite a piece of work, and I'm going to keep studying it, and I'll share parts from time to time as I think I want to let you know about. You know what? The rest of the evening, I think I'm going to just check in with you guys on the chat and see what's on your mind. Oh, we have 86 people here tonight. That's wonderful. Thanks for joining me, everybody. I do appreciate it. Um, it's January the 28th, and that means it's less than 2 months till spring. That's good. But it's snowing right now here on Mystery Island. All right, I'm just going to scroll back a little bit. Peter Thiel, this my disciple of Schmidt. You mean Carl Schmidt? I think you mean Carl Schmidt. I hope I'm not wrong about that. Yeah, that's interesting. I need to know more about Peter Thiel. It's one of those ones that I read some about him, and when I was just starting with George, almost 4 years ago now, he was interesting, but I don't remember much about him since then. The Crown hired a U.S. Italian American anarchist and paid his travel to Italy to shoot the king. Okay. Rexford Tugwell, the Robert Mueller II partner, worked at Philbro same time as Mark Rich. Maybe Tugwell is Pincus Green. Hmm. Well, that's the idea I wanted to share tonight. Children of Satan. This is the end justifies the means philosophy. No, it's the opposite of Christianity, where you and I think it's that Sabbatean Frankism that Bill Taylor talks about. It's the same idea that the world is a battleground, and the world needs to sort out, people, and this is where the wheat is ground. The wheat is separated from the chaff. And so, in order for that to work, there has to be a Satan. There has to be an evil figure. There has to be something that is doing the bad stuff to give the good people something to fight about, to fight against. Okay, so if there wasn't, you know, if there was an opportunity to commit sin, then I wouldn't have the opportunity to develop my soul so that I can make it into heaven. So they are happy to provide the opportunity of sin for us, and this is where I think the Jesuits do it. This is if you remember rulers of evil and how they will use this sophisticated logic to justify doing whatever they really want to do. That's where it also comes back to World War II and Nazism in particular, because of the idea of the power of will, the power of the will. It takes the power of the will to overcome the conscience. If your conscience tells you don't do something, or maybe just because you're loyal to your country or loyal to your family or loyal to your boss or something, but you don't want to do something, but some higher power, some force that's you have to obey tells you you have to do this. So you have this conflict in you. I shouldn't do this, but I'm supposed to do this and I have to do this. And then you say, well, I will do this. I will do this. I have the will, you know? Triumph des Willens, the triumph of the will. The incredibly famous movie by um, Riefenstahl. And the power of that movie was to show, in not only in the amazingly great cinematography, just black and white, but awesome, but also to show, the airplane flying through the clouds and the crowds and the beautiful cars and all the wonderful people. And this is a contrast to the desolation of Germany in the 30s. So that the message is, hey, go with Hitler. Just go with Hitler. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be wonderful. We're gonna have this wonderful revival of who we are, and everybody's gonna be well fed and happy. Well, that's Aleister Crowley, and that's the British Tavistock Institute, and everybody that's trying to get us to bend to the will of the synarchy, to go along with what they want, to accept the king's coin. And I'm just so proud of the group that we have that is resisting right now. And we have to keep on resisting, and you know, we just have to keep on being ourselves. I am who I am. I have a conscience. I obey my conscience. If I don't obey my conscience, I feel bad. And No, I hope that everyone has an upbringing that gets them to the point where they have a conscience. And if you don't obey your conscience, you feel bad because that's the way we can build a stronger country with people that will make a small personal sacrifice in order to obey a larger good. Sometimes it's easy, if your country's under attack and you say, well, I'm going to go sign up, I'm going to go join the army. And so many thousands and millions of people have done that over the time of professional fighting and and patriotism. But when we're not confronted with an immediate emergency choice, but this everyday small things, the only thing that we can have to guide us is our conscience. And I just hope that when we look toward the next generations, are they going to grow up with consciences, or are they going to grow up under this medieval view of humanity as basically livestock, and deprive them of an education and deprive them of the ability to think and to reason and to have the ability to form a judgment as to what is right and what is wrong, but simply to obey, as you see in those baseball caps that said "obey" on them, that went around for years, and they're planting that mental image in us that we just need to obey. Can they do that? Well, they sure are trying, aren't they? And that's where we're at right now. We are we may be the last generation of humans that aren't connected to the Borg. And so I take this responsibility very seriously. And thanks for being with me tonight. Y'all have a good weekend. I'll see you Monday. Good night.